He built cities, bought silence, bent the world to his will, until his little girl stopped walking. When medicine ran out of answers, a barefoot boy appeared on a fog-laced beach with a bottle of amber oil and a whisper, "Your legs remember." Skepticism collides with wonder as sunrise sessions awaken tingles, storms drown hope, and a father learns that healing isn't force, it's presence. This isn't a miracle made in a lab. It's a battle waged in salt air, patient hands, and a child's stubborn heart. When the tide finally turns, the richest man alive discovers the one thing he could never buy: faith. Arthur Blackwell could buy anything: private jets, a vineyard in Tuscany, Senate influence. He'd once paid $3 million just to cancel a neighbor's construction project because it interrupted his ocean view. Power wasn't a goal for Arthur, it was a habit. Until the day his daughter stopped walking. Lily was 7, a freak accident on a ski slope. A split-second miscalculation, a bad landing, and a spinal cord that no longer connected to the world the way it used to. The doctors were crisp and rehearsed. T7 complete, they said, like it was a script. No motor function below the injury site. Arthur wrote checks with more zeros than most nations' GDP. He flew in specialists from Zurich, Tokyo, Tel Aviv. Some of them came just for the photo op. Nothing worked. He had built skyscrapers in 5 countries, designed cityscapes that won awards, earned headlines, defined skylines. But none of that mattered here. Not to the 8-year-old girl who once danced barefoot through beach foam and now couldn't feel the floor beneath her feet. She hadn't spoken since the accident. 3 months of silence. Not anger, not fear, just a quiet, resigned withdrawal, as if part of her had left with the waves that day. That was 6 months ago. Now, every morning, Arthur pushed Lily's wheelchair along the edge of North Point Beach. It was the only place she didn't cry. The waves seemed to soothe her in ways science could not. He told himself the salt air was therapeutic. He told himself she was healing. He lied a lot these days. Then came the boy. He appeared out of nowhere, barefoot, holding a small bottle of amber oil and eyes that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. Matty was dirty, silent, too thin, but not scared. He walked straight up to Lily's chair and said, "I can help." Arthur froze. "Excuse me?" "I can help her legs remember." Arthur narrowed his eyes. "Where are your parents?" Matty shrugged. "Don't have any." "Are you with a church?" "Nope." "Are you homeless?" Matty grinned. "I prefer beach resident." Arthur was already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling security." But Lily, who hadn't spoken much in weeks, said softly, "Wait." Arthur blinked. She was looking at Matty. "Did you say my legs can remember?" Matty nodded. "They're asleep, not gone." Arthur laughed once, sharp, bitter. "Kid, if nonsense was medicine, I'd be running a church, not a tech empire." Matty didn't flinch. He just held up the oil bottle. "This belonged to my mom. She used it when I fell. She said the body doesn't forget, only the brain does." Arthur's mind moved at the speed of a CEO in crisis mode. Child endangerment risk, lawsuits, optics. Then Lily reached out and touched Matty's wrist, and Arthur froze. It wasn't the boy's words. It wasn't the oil. It was the look in his daughter's eyes. Hope. Tiny, fragile, but real. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The next morning, just before sunrise, The beach at North Point was deserted. A thin veil of marine fog clung to the shoreline, and the sand, still damp from the tide, bore only the faint traces of seabirds and wind. Arthur Blackwell's luxury SUV crunched softly over the gravel as he pulled into the hidden access road. He didn't say much as he unbuckled Lily from her restraints. Her eyes were half-lidded, her small body wrapped in a cashmere blanket. She hadn't asked questions, hadn't spoken at all, but her head turned toward the waves as if instinctively pulled. Arthur looked ridiculous. A grown man of power and precision, standing on a remote beach at dawn because of a barefoot boy's strange claim. The whole thing felt absurd, and yet, here he was. Matty arrived without ceremony. One moment, the beach was empty, and the next, the boy stepped through the dunes like he'd always belonged there. His feet were bare, his jeans rolled at the cuffs, a canvas bag slung across one shoulder, and his sketchbook tucked under his arm. He gave Arthur a small, wordless nod, then walked straight to Lily's side. No hesitation, no performance. "Good morning, Lily," he said quietly. "The air feels strong today. That's good." Lily blinked, unsure what to do with him. She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. Arthur stepped forward. "So, what now?" His voice was edged. "Going to chant something? Burn sage? Command the tide?" Matty didn't react to the sarcasm. Instead, he sat cross-legged in the sand, placed his sketchbook aside, and opened the canvas bag. Inside were a small bottle of dark amber liquid, a folded cloth, and a few smooth stones. "My mama made this," he said, holding up the bottle. "It's oil. Ginger root, mint, bay, and camellia. Good for circulation," she said. "But the real trick isn't what's in the oil. It's how you listen to what the leg remembers." He poured a little into his hands, rubbed them together slowly, and looked up. "May I?" Arthur didn't answer, but Lily gave a tiny nod, the kind that only a father could see. Matty began gently. Not in the way the therapists had, no pressure, no cold detachment. His fingers moved lightly over her skin, tracing from ankle to knee, almost like he was reading Braille with his hands. "She's quiet," he murmured, "but not gone. It's like a creek that got blocked. Still water doesn't mean dead water." Arthur folded his arms tightly. This was absurd. He'd seen the scans, heard the diagnosis. No nerve activity, no chance. And yet, Lily didn't flinch. Her body, usually rigid during treatment, had relaxed. Her breathing had changed. It was small, but unmistakable. Matty reached into his bag again, pulled out a stone, and placed it in Lily's hand. He said, "That's for you to hold. Not because it does anything, just because it's smooth. Sometimes smooth things help us wait." Arthur couldn't take it. He stepped back, pacing. "What exactly are you expecting to happen?" he asked. Matty didn't look up. "Nothing today, maybe nothing tomorrow, but if we listen long enough, something might whisper back." Arthur didn't know what to say, but he didn't stop the boy, and he didn't leave. Matty returned the next morning, just as he had promised. Quiet, barefoot, steady. The light over North Point was different this time. Hazy gold filtered through the thinning fog, making everything feel like the memory of a dream. Arthur was already there, having arrived early, unable to sleep. Lily sat bundled in her wheelchair, her face turned toward the sea, as if she were waiting for something. Or someone. This time, Matty didn't ask for permission. He simply knelt beside her, uncapped the small amber bottle, and rubbed the oil slowly between his palms. The scent rose immediately, warm ginger, sharp mint, and something woodsy underneath. Not unpleasant, strange, but comforting. Lily's eyes flickered toward him. "Still smells like my mama's hands," Matty said, almost to himself. Then he looked up. "You ready?" Again, the smallest of nods. Arthur was standing farther back this time, hands in pockets, trying to look disinterested. But every part of him was leaning forward, watching. Matty began with the same soft touch. Circular movements along Lily's calves, gentle pressure to her feet. His eyes were half closed, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak much, only a few quiet words here and there. "Too tight here. Okay, now soften." He wasn't manipulating muscles so much as engaging them, like someone coaxing a scared animal out of hiding. Lily watched him, and she didn't pull away. Arthur noticed that. She didn't shrink. She wasn't stiff. Her arms were loose on the armrests, her shoulders down instead of up around her ears. He'd never seen her like that since the accident. "She's not broken," Matty said softly, as if sensing Arthur's stare. "She's just closed up, like a seashell after the tide leaves." Arthur frowned. "You think metaphors are medicine?" Matty shook his head. "No. I think stories are. The body listens to 'em, same as the brain." He placed his fingertips gently behind Lily's knees, then paused. He was still for a long moment, as if listening. Then, with both hands, he began a series of small, rhythmic compressions, alternating pressure along muscle lines. Not deep, not forceful, just enough to wake something. He hummed as he worked, a quiet, tuneless vibration, more breath than melody. Arthur couldn't look away. After 20 minutes, Matty stopped. He sat back on his heels, palms resting on his thighs. Lily looked at him, not with curiosity, but with calm. And that, Arthur realized, was the miracle. Calm had been gone from her face for months. "That's it for today," Matty said. Arthur blinked. "That's it?" Matty nodded. "You don't yell at flowers for not blooming the second you water them." Arthur almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he walked to Lily's side. She looked up at him with something like peace. Maybe it was the sea air. Maybe it was the warmth of oil on skin. Maybe it was just the feeling of being touched, like she mattered again. He didn't understand what Matty was doing, but for the first time since the hospital, he didn't want to stop it.
By the end of the first week, the sessions had become a ritual. Each morning, just before the sun broke free of the horizon, Arthur and Lily would arrive at North Point. Matty would already be there, waiting with his little canvas bag and a sketchbook that was slowly filling with charcoal drawings of waves, birds, and Lily herself. The process never changed. Oil, touch, stillness, and a strange kind of reverence. Matty never rushed, never repeated exactly the same movements. Some days he spoke about the ocean, other days he said nothing at all. But always he was present in a way Arthur had come to envy, like the boy belonged to this place in a way the rest of them didn't. Arthur found himself changing too. He still didn't believe in miracles, but he couldn't deny what he saw. Lily had begun to lean into the process, tilting her head toward Matty's voice, watching the stones he gave her, even smiling, faintly, at his stories about seaweed that whispered secrets or starfish that waited centuries to move. Then, one morning, it happened. It was barely light. The sky was a soft blue-gray, and the surf whispered its endless rhythm. Matty was massaging Lily's feet with warm oil, his thumbs moving in slow circles. Arthur was standing by the driftwood log sipping lukewarm coffee, half lost in thought when he heard it. "Daddy," Lily said, her voice hushed, "it feels weird." Arthur turned so fast he almost spilled his cup. "What feels weird?" he asked, already kneeling beside her. She blinked slowly. "My toes, they're tingly, like there are ants having a party in there." Arthur's heart stopped. His rational brain immediately surged forward. Phantom sensation, wishful thinking, involuntary twitch. He opened his mouth to temper her expectations, to be the adult, but then he looked into her face. She wasn't confused. She wasn't guessing. She was certain. Matty didn't speak. He just sat back on his heels, a quiet smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. Not smug, not surprised, as if he'd been expecting this moment all along. Arthur reached down and gently touched the top of Lily's foot. "Here?" he asked. She nodded. "It tickles now." Tears welled in Arthur's eyes before he could stop them. Not dramatic sobs, just silent, relentless moisture that blurred the entire beach. He covered his face with one hand, turning away slightly, ashamed of his own hope. "Don't stop," Lily whispered. "Please don't stop coming." "I won't," Matty replied softly. "We're just getting started." Later that day, Arthur did what he'd sworn not to do. He mentioned it to Dr. Hayes. He told her about the sensation, the oil, the beach sessions. Her reaction was swift and clinical. "It's common. Phantom limb response, transient nerve noise, not actual recovery." But what if, "Mr. Blackwell, you're a father, not a neurologist. I understand your desire to find meaning in every flicker, but I caution you, untrained manipulation of an already compromised spinal cord can worsen her condition. Hope is a beautiful thing, but it can be dangerous when misdirected." Arthur left that conversation more conflicted than ever. But that evening, Lily took his hand and whispered, "I think they want to wake up, Daddy." He didn't know if she meant her toes or her legs, maybe both. But for the first time, he didn't argue.
Arthur didn't bring it up again. Not to his friends, not to his colleagues, not even to his therapist, who had once told him that grief often disguised itself as obsession. He simply returned to the beach every morning, sat on the driftwood log with his coffee, and watched Matty work. But the world has a way of sniffing out the quiet things. It started with a nurse at the institute. She'd heard about Lily's improvement through another parent who had seen the girl smiling near the waves. Then came a phone call from Dr. Evelyn Hayes herself, cool, measured, and laced with professional concern. "Arthur," she said, her voice clipped, "I understand Lily is receiving alternative interventions outside the institute." Arthur didn't answer right away. "I'd like to speak with you in person," Hayes continued, "this week." The conference room was all glass and chrome. A view of the ocean framed the scene behind Dr. Hayes like a painting. She sat across from Arthur with a tablet in hand, a single eyebrow arched. "I reviewed Lily's file. There's no documented clinical improvement," she said. "Yet you've described increased sensation, spontaneous twitching, and behavioral progress." Arthur nodded slowly. "Yes, all of that." She placed the tablet down. "And this is being attributed to a barefoot 10-year-old boy applying scented oil on a beach." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. "Arthur," she said more gently, "you're not just her father. You're a highly intelligent man. You know better than to confuse correlation with causation."
Arthur leaned forward, his hands folded. I'm watching my daughter smile again. I'm watching her respond to touch. That's not in her chart because it didn't happen on your property. It didn't happen under licensed supervision, Hayes snapped. Do you realize the liability, if she regresses or worse? I realize, he said calmly, that no one in this building even tried to touch her legs last week. You handed me a pamphlet and told me to adapt. Her jaw tightened, because adaptation is sometimes the only realistic outcome. Arthur exhaled sharply, then leaned back. What if it's not? She stood, pacing slowly. Look, I know you're desperate. No, Arthur interrupted, his voice low but steady. I was desperate. Now I'm curious. And if curiosity is dangerous, then maybe it's because the system doesn't know how to hold it. There was silence. Then Hayes said, This boy, does he have medical training? He has patience, he has presence, and he has my daughter's trust. And right now, that's doing more for her than all your machines. Hayes's eyes narrowed. If you want to continue treatment here, I suggest you cease this beachside fantasy immediately. Arthur stood, collecting his coat. Then maybe this isn't the right place anymore. As he opened the door, Hayes added, Be careful, Arthur. False hope has ruined more recoveries than failure ever did. He paused, then said without turning back, Maybe what ruins people isn't hope, it's the lack of it. That evening, he didn't tell Lily about the meeting. He just knelt beside her bed, tucked the blanket under her chin, and whispered, We'll be back on the beach tomorrow. She smiled, eyes still closed. Good, she murmured. The tide's coming in. I think my feet can feel it.
The beach was quiet again, but not dead. It was the kind of stillness that came after a storm, not emptiness, but exhaustion. The sand bore the scars of violence, scattered with broken shells and twisted driftwood, yet the sky was clearing. The ocean, once roaring, now exhaled in slow, steady breaths. Lily didn't want to go back. Not at first. Arthur had asked her gently that morning if she felt up to trying again. She only shook her head. Her voice, which had grown stronger in the past weeks, had retreated into silence. The disappointment had sunk deep, not just into her legs, but into her spirit. Arthur didn't press. He just made coffee, sat beside her on the couch, let the day pass. Then, just before dinner, a knock came at the door. When Arthur opened it, Matty stood on the porch, barefoot and holding the oil bottle, the one Arthur thought he had shattered. I fixed the top, the boy said, holding it out like a peace offering. The glass wasn't cracked, just the cap. Arthur stared at it, speechless. Matty didn't wait to be invited in. He walked to Lily, crouched beside her, and whispered something Arthur couldn't hear. Lily's response was just a glance, but it was enough. The next morning, they returned to the beach. This time, there were no oils, no touch, no humming. Matty sat in the sand beside Lily and simply talked. He told her about pelicans, how they wait for the right wave before diving. He spoke of his mother, Sophia, who once saved a man from a stroke by noticing how his hand trembled like a broken compass. He recited a story about sand dunes that shifted slowly, invisibly, but always returned to their shape. Lily listened. Sometimes she asked questions, sometimes she didn't. They didn't call it therapy anymore. They called it sitting time.
After a few days, Matty offered her a paintbrush and said, "You draw, I'll listen." She frowned. "I don't know how." "Doesn't matter. Your hands do." That day, she painted the sea in short, jerky strokes that made Arthur's throat tighten. Arthur, for his part, stopped hovering. Instead, he began reading about circulation, about tactile memory. He watched YouTube videos on cranial sacral therapy, even downloaded a free PDF on traditional Vietnamese acupressure points. It didn't matter whether it made full scientific sense. What mattered was that something about it helped her believe again. That belief, Arthur realized, was half the treatment. One evening, as the sky turned a bruised orange, Lily asked Matty quietly, "Do you think they're still in there? My legs, I mean?" Matty smiled. "I think they never left. They're just waiting for you to call them back." Lily was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Tomorrow, I want to try again." Arthur heard her from a distance, and he closed his eyes. Not in fear, in relief. The tide, it seemed, had finally started to return. The beach was quiet again, but not dead. It was the kind of stillness that came after a storm, not emptiness, but exhaustion. The sand bore the scars of violence, scattered with broken shells and twisted driftwood, yet the sky was clearing. The ocean, once roaring, now exhaled in slow, steady breaths. Lily didn't want to go back. Not at first. Arthur had asked her gently that morning if she felt up to trying again. She only shook her head. Her voice, which had grown stronger in the past weeks, had retreated into silence. The disappointment had sunk deep, not just into her legs, but into her spirit. Arthur didn't press. He just made coffee, sat beside her on the couch, let the day pass. Then, just before dinner, a knock came at the door. When Arthur opened it, Matty stood on the porch, barefoot and holding the oil bottle, the one Arthur thought he had shattered. "I fixed the top," the boy said, holding it out like a peace offering. "The glass wasn't cracked, just the cap." Arthur stared at it, speechless. Matty didn't wait to be invited in. He walked to Lily, crouched beside her, and whispered something Arthur couldn't hear. Lily's response was just a glance, but it was enough. The next morning, they returned to the beach. This time, there were no oils, no touch, no humming. Matty sat in the sand beside Lily and simply talked. He told her about pelicans, how they wait for the right wave before diving. He spoke of his mother, Sophia, who once saved a man from a stroke by noticing how his hand trembled like a broken compass. He recited a story about sand dunes that shifted slowly, invisibly, but always returned to their shape. Lily listened. Sometimes she asked questions, sometimes she didn't. They didn't call it therapy anymore. They called it sitting time. After a few days, Matty offered her a paintbrush and said, "You draw, I'll listen." She frowned. "I don't know how." "Doesn't matter. Your hands do." That day, she painted the sea in short, jerky strokes that made Arthur's throat tighten. Arthur, for his part, stopped hovering. Instead, he began reading about circulation, about tactile memory. He watched YouTube videos on cranial sacral therapy, even downloaded a free PDF on traditional Vietnamese acupressure points. It didn't matter whether it made full scientific sense. What mattered was that something about it helped her believe again.
That belief, Arthur realized, was half the treatment. One evening, as the sky turned a bruised orange, Lily asked Matty quietly, "Do you think they're still in there? My legs, I mean?" Matty smiled. "I think they never left. They're just waiting for you to call them back." Lily was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Tomorrow, I want to try again." Arthur heard her from a distance, and he closed his eyes. Not in fear, in relief. The tide, it seemed, had finally started to return.
The news spread slowly, like a secret carried by the sea breeze. First, it was a physical therapist from the rehab center who came just to see. Then 2 parents, their teenage son in a wheelchair between them, asked if they could sit and watch. By the end of the month, there were strangers showing up at North Point every morning, some with hope, others with doubt, all carrying stories of their own. But the boy who started it all never changed. Matty continued to come barefoot, with his canvas bag and sketchbook, never asking for praise or money. When people tried to film him, he simply walked away. "I'm not the story," he'd say. "The body is." Arthur found himself becoming something he never thought he'd be, a student of patience. He stopped designing buildings. Instead, he spent his mornings watching the tide, helping Matty set up makeshift sessions for children and adults alike. He helped build simple ramps, shade tents, and even coordinated with physical therapists who were curious but cautious. Dr. Hayes was one of them. She returned often, sometimes just to observe. At first, her presence made Arthur tense, but then, slowly, something shifted. One morning, she asked Matty if she could take notes. He nodded. Another day, she brought portable EMG equipment and quietly ran diagnostics while Lily walked. What she found was confounding. "There's no medical precedent for this kind of progression," she said, half in awe, half in concern. Arthur only smiled. "Maybe we just forgot to listen." Hayes didn't argue. Instead, she invited Matty to speak at the Institute. He declined twice. On the third invitation, he agreed, but only if Lily came with him. A few weeks later, Lily stood before a lecture hall of clinicians in Santa Monica. She was still a bit wobbly, still needed help on the stairs, but she walked to the podium herself. Her hair was in a braid, her dress a simple blue cotton. She didn't read from a script. She just said, "I used to think my legs were broken. Then I thought they were asleep. But maybe they were just waiting for me to forgive them." Silence. Then applause. Not polite, not performative, real. Afterwards, Matty didn't linger. He handed Dr. Hayes a drawing, Lily standing with her arms outstretched on the sand, the sun behind her like a halo, and walked out. That was the last Arthur saw of him for a while. North Point became a quiet sanctuary, not a clinic, not a school, just a place where people came to remember that healing didn't always come in straight lines or under fluorescent lights. Arthur eventually launched the Sophia Herrera Fund, named after Matty's mother, to support integrative recovery programs combining traditional therapy with sensory-based engagement. Lily went back to school. She didn't run, she didn't compete, but she walked the halls with pride, sometimes with a cane, sometimes not. And every now and then, on a quiet Saturday, she would walk barefoot on the beach, just to remember, not the pain, but the miracle that wasn't really a miracle
at all. Just persistence.
Arthur Blackwell thought money could solve anything, until it couldn't. When doctors failed his daughter, he didn't just face heartbreak, he faced powerlessness. For a man used to shaping skylines and rewriting laws, nothing felt more foreign than watching and waiting. But healing doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to presence. Through a barefoot boy named Matty, Arthur discovered a truth no billion-dollar boardroom ever taught. Sometimes the body needs to be heard, not hacked. Touch needs to be trusted, not controlled. The story forces us to ask, are we treating symptoms or listening to stories? Have we turned healing into a transaction when it's actually a relationship? In the end, the lesson wasn't about spinal nerves or oil or barefoot rituals. It was about remembering that some things can't be forced, only received. And when the most powerful man in the room finally surrendered, that's when his daughter stood up. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe, because these stories matter. Question: what do you think healing really means? Is it science? Is it faith? Or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts below. We read every comment. And don't forget, tomorrow's video reveals what happened when a woman in a coma heard her daughter's voice and blinked once. Then again, you won't want to miss it.